Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Family Tech Talk Night. We will just give it another minute as we wait for additional participants. Oops. Gigi, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat instructions in Spanish on how to select the Spanish channel, I would appreciate that. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Family Tech Talk Night. We're just going to give it one more minute as we wait for other attendees to join us. Thank you, Gigi. Okay. Well, let's get started then. Welcome, everyone, to Family Tech Talk Night. My name is Lynette Owens. I'm the founder and global director of Trend Micro's Internet Safety for Kids and Families program. We actually are hosting this evening's event together with PTO Today, with whom we've been partnering for a decade now to bring these sessions to communities of parents and families all around the country. Before we begin, again, as was put in the chat, if you need to listen in Spanish, please select the globe icon and then pick Spanish as your language. If you have questions throughout the session, please use the Q&A option, and I will pause throughout the session to address your questions. So please put them in the Q&A option, and I have an easier time of catching those questions there versus the chat. And finally, at the conclusion of tonight's event, when you close out of Zoom, you will see a survey pop up. We would love your feedback about the evening, and it should only take you a couple of minutes to complete that. So just something to remember. And finally, and I will repeat this again later on, tonight's session is being recorded. And at the end of the session, I will provide my contact information. If you'd like a copy of the recording, you will need to reach out to me to get access to the recording after this evening. So I'd first like to welcome all of the schools who indicated they would be joining us this evening. Welcome. There are 15 of you, and some of you requested a way in which to track your attendees, to track those families from your schools that have attended this evening. So we've assigned every school a code specific to your school. I will show this again later on in the presentation in case people join us late, but please make note of your attendance code. Your school may not be requiring this, but there are some of you out there who did ask for this. So please make note of your attendance code for your school to the right of your school's name. Okay, great. So let me tell you a little bit about me, but before I do that, I'm going to ask you a little bit about you. So using the polling option, I would like to know, how old is your oldest child? Use the polling option. Are they A, 5 years old or younger, B, 6 to 10 years old, C, 11 to 14 years old, or D, 15 and older? How old is your oldest child? A, B, C, or D? Okay, great. I'm going to end it here and share that. So it looks like most of you, we've got a tie between 6 to 10 and 11 to 14. So perfect. I think a few of you've got older ones. I actually have two teenagers. My oldest is 17. My youngest is 14. I've been doing this work for 13 years, actually, for Trend. And so I'm going to share a lot of information with you tonight. I hope will be helpful. And before we go into it, I need one more question from you so I can make sure to focus on issues that matter to you most. Which of these topics are most important for you or you're most interested to learn about? And you can just put this in the chat. I don't actually have the polling question available for this. So is it A, managing screen time for your kids? B, helping my kids stick to age-appropriate content? C, dealing with online bullying or hate? D, getting ideas for positive uses of the internet? Or E, not sure, I just want to learn something new. So I don't have the poll for this, but if you go ahead and put it in the chat, which of these is most important to you or most interesting to you? A, B, C, D, or E? Okay, great. All right. Well, let me just tell you, we have lots of answers from all over, and many A's and B's and E's. There's something for everyone here. So, but that gives me a good sense of where your minds are at and what you're most concerned about. So, I think to open this up, a lot changed in the past year. We don't need to belabor this at all. But, some things did not. And of course, one of those things is that we may have said yes to more screen time. We may have felt guilty at some point over the past year because they were on their screens so much more. And our children still needed our guidance even so. And by the way, you should not feel guilty. If you made the choice to keep your children home and them, and your community safe, and in exchange that for screen time for them, I don't think you're a bad parent at all. So many parents have said that to me over the past year, and there was no recipe for what happened to us. So we should not feel bad one bit about it, but we can learn from it too. Another thing that didn't change were the risks. The risks were actually still there online for our kids, risks of, unwanted contact from people they don't know, inappropriate content that's not good for their ages, overuse, misuse, bullying, anxiety, and so on. So those remain, and those will still be around even after we get to the other side of the pandemic. But the benefits were always there as well. And maybe you as a family discovered a new way to use technology to bring you closer together. Maybe Zoom became a tool that you didn't use a year and a half ago, but now you use it to have reunions with far away family and friends. And that is why teaching our kids to be good digital citizens is, and always will be a priority. What do we mean by digital citizenship? Well, it is about safety. It is about knowing the risks and how to avoid them. That's an important part of it, but it's not the only part. It also includes digital literacy. What we mean by that is, if I know that privacy is important to protect, then being digitally literate means I know how to actually do that. I know where to find the privacy settings. I know which setting is safer than the others, and so on. It's also important that we talk about how we behave towards others, how we behave in online spaces when there are rules of how to engage with others. And finally, very often when we talk to children about technology, it's a long list of what not to do. We have to remember, and we have to balance those conversations with the ways in which they should use technology? What good habits and what positive uses are we also teaching our children? Because we know it's important for them to master it for their futures, not just for school, but also for jobs and for, the good of the world around them. So we like to break this up into 4 parts, and we are going to spend time more deeply under each of these. When we talk about being online, what we're talking about is setting up the right environment for your kids, setting up the rules, and setting a good example for them. When we talk about being safe, we will cover protecting your privacy, protecting your personal information, and even protecting your physical self. When we talk about kindness, we will, of course, discuss why you should be and how you can be kind to other people, but we need to direct that kindness back to ourselves as well. And finally, being savvy is about practicing good habits and encouraging good uses. So, I think really quickly on this topic for setting up the environment, there's the physical environment, which all of you have had to do already for the last 14 months. But let's try to pick up some good habits and keep them going again long after the pandemic is over. Things like making sure your children are, when they're working on their laptops or devices for school, for example, that they're not hunching over, that they're not sort of in weird positions that will ultimately be bad for their posture, that they're taking breaks for their eyes. You can certainly invest in things like blue light glasses that are not expensive. Amazon sells them in packs of 4 or 6 or 5. They don't require a prescription, but they can do a lot of safety for the backs of the eyes. Even for us as adults, we need to remember that. Another part about setting up the environment is about your actual network, the Wi-Fi network in your house. So again, maybe many of you already had to deal with this, but it probably is a good idea to remember the password that came with that router. If you haven't changed it in a while, make sure you do that. Very often people buy the router and they never change the password. But that's an important step in setting up an environment that is safe for you and for your kids. A second one is actually maybe something you hadn't heard of before, and that is to separate which parts of your Wi-Fi your children are on versus what you are on. So if you work from home, or if you have a laptop that has sensitive information like, family photos or tax information or some financial records and so on, consider putting those devices on the main part of that Wi-Fi connection. But very often you have an option to have a guest network. That's the one that you should put your kids' devices on, like iPads, gaming devices, a Kindle reader, something like that, where the information on it is not as sensitive as yours might be. That way, if one of their devices becomes hacked or compromised in some way, it won't harm the devices on the separate part of the network. That is the reason to consider 2 different parts. A Wi-Fi extender, that's something that helps you improve the Wi-Fi connection in different parts of your house. Kind of expensive, but it's worth it if you need to spread out and you want to make sure everyone has good Wi-Fi connection. And finally, if you all need to be on at the same time, try to talk to each other and see if you can't compromise so you're not all on it at once, because that might just bring everything down. Maybe you experienced that this past year, and maybe it's getting better now if the kids are back to school. In terms of setting up other things in the technical sense, make sure security software is on every device in the home, including phones, by the way, including iPads, not just laptops and desktops, every device. And inside that security software is something called a firewall. And the firewall is a secondary way of watching traffic that's going in and out of your device or your laptop to make sure that only the good stuff is coming in and the bad stuff is staying out. Now, where are the best products? I'm going to be sending out a link to everyone. I'm sorry, a document to everyone with links to everything that I talk about tonight, including how you can look up the top, security software options out there. We'll talk a minute about practicing good password skills, an example of how you can do this with your children so they start practicing it at a young age or as young as possible. Turning on multi-factor authentication, sometimes it's called two-factor authentication, sorry. Sometimes it's called two-step verification, but it is another level of security on your Instagram, Facebook account, TikTok account, Roblox account, and so on. The way it works is after you enter a password to get into your account, there's a second step required. And maybe you've already turned this on for your Facebook or Instagram account, for example. If you haven't, you should, because that second step means a code gets sent to either your email address or it's texted to your phone. If someone were to steal your password, they should not be able to get into your account if you have multi-factor authentication on, because they would also have to have your phone in order for them to get that second code to log into your account. So if today this is not on your accounts, if they're not on at TikTok or Instagram or Snapchat for your kids or Roblox, you should turn that on today. And finally, if you're connecting anywhere in public spaces, never do that without using a virtual private network. Again, the document I will send has a link to some of the best virtual private network options out there. But that means that when your content, when your personal information is sent from your device, let's say to Amazon, you're shopping and you're sending credit card information over, that the process while it travels is protected. The virtual private network protects it while it's en route. Some good habits you can also teach your kids as well is make sure you're updating everything all the time. The phone, every app on your phone, your kids' iPads, make a habit every night to do the updates if there are any. Because this past year during the pandemic, everyone was online so much more. The hackers were out there knowing that was the case, and they were trying to expose vulnerabilities in the apps that we love in order to try and hack us. So when an app is telling you they have an update, very often that update is covering up that kind of a hole. Sometimes it's just for cosmetic reasons, but most of the time it's because of a security vulnerability. So make sure you update frequently. An idea for passwords, a lot of times we think, okay, if you throw in a special character, then that makes it strong. That's true. But the longer the password is, the stronger it is. 10 characters or more is stronger. A five character password with special characters is not as strong as a 10 character password. So an idea for this with your kids is to say, why don't you think of a sentence and make the first letter of every word the password? That way they can remember it better, even though it looks like a very difficult password here, right? I don't even know if I have 10 characters on this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, I don't. I should have more. But, and then work with them to change it maybe once a month or once every other month, however frequently you would like. It's just a good habit you can start with kids at a very young age. Back up everything. If you're an Apple family, you have iCloud that you can back things up to, and you got to pay after a certain amount. You've got to pay a little bit more. That's great. If you're an Android family or you use Google devices, you have Google Cloud. Again, free for a little bit, but then you have to pay. That's great too. But I highly recommend that you not only rely on the cloud storage options, you should invest in one of those drives as well. You can get them online at Amazon, Best Buy, so on. Because if ever one of those two was compromised, let's say the cloud one is hacked, you at least have the hard drive. Or if for some reason the hard drive one gets broken, you have the other one as backup. I highly, highly recommend you do that. Now let's talk about tech tools, because many of you said, you're interested in things like screen time and, managing that kind of stuff for your kids. So these tools are far more plentiful the last few years than they ever have been in all the time that I've been doing this work. And these tools exist already inside the things you already own. It's not even things you need to buy extra. They help you filter content that might not be appropriate for your kids. You can also limit the amount of time that they're on a specific app. You can watch a little bit about what they're doing with a specific device. And you can make sure they're not racking up charges, let's say in a game, and charging up levels in that game against your credit card. So there's some great options out there today, and I'm going to walk you through a few of them now. I do, again, for those of you who've joined a little bit later, please put your questions in the Q&A and use the globe icon and select Spanish if you'd like to listen to our translator, Gigi, who is our Spanish translator tonight. So the first one is called iOS screen time. Go ahead and put it in the chat. Are any of you using or familiar with iOS screen time already for your kids? iOS screen time exists under the settings, and it's a great option if your kids are also on Apple devices to be able to monitor, manage, and restrict lots of things. Okay, so what you'll need to do is set up your child with an Apple account under your own, and you can see this is my phone, and you can see down here are my two kids whose names I blurred to protect their privacy, because they'd be really mad at me if I didn't. And once you select one of the kids, you can see a number of options that you can do, like restricting the kinds of apps they could download, or even levels of privacy, such as who they can contact or who can contact them. You can restrict, again, the kind. You can even see, I don't know if you've seen this for those of you who use it, you can see how long your child was on the device for that day or week. You can see what they were spending their time on, like Instagram or YouTube or whatever. But you can also see how many times they actually picked up the device, which is really kind of crazy. It's the same setting that you get the alert on Sundays saying, you used your phone 16% more time than the week before, and you feel all guilty and everything, and then you don't change your behavior. But anyway, it's all coming from the same data collection capability through Apple. Anybody's kids using TikTok out there? Any TikTok? Any TikTok? Put it in the chat. Anybody's kids who are begging for TikTok and you're not ready to let them use it? Yeah, I'm seeing yeses and nos out there. Yes. What kid doesn't want access to TikTok, right? Well, for those of you who are not quite ready to allow it, TikTok family pairing is a great option for you and your child. And I applaud TikTok for being to do this, because this is a way for both of you to ease into TikTok. So here's how it works. You will go, first you'll have to download TikTok on both your device and the device that your child is going to use. So this assumes two different devices, right? Now, if they're using yours, then you could just set this on your own and just let them borrow. But if it's two different devices, here's how it works. You go into the settings, you select digital well-being. There you will see family pairing, okay? Once you select family pairing, it's going to ask you, is this device parent or child? So then you click, right? Now, assuming you pick parent, you will next see how to set, or the options for setting how much time they can spend on it, what kind of content they'll be able to see, and finally, who is able to contact them through the app. Is the setting perfect? Does it filter everything? It is not 100% perfect, but it's pretty good. I have tested this, and they'll mostly see animals and, you know, pretty harmless stuff. So it's a nice way to ease into it, especially if you set the time limits too, and, you know, let them show you that they can be responsible for it until they're truly ready for the full TikTok. But based on some of the ages that you told me your eldest children are, they're probably not ready for the full TikTok. Does anybody have children who use and love Roblox? I know there's some of you out there. There has to be. It's probably the fastest growing app out there. For those of you not familiar, Roblox is not a game itself. It is a platform. It is a community of games and gamers. And it's quite wonderful, actually. There's a lot of young people who've created the games that other young people love to play. So there's two issues, though, about Roblox. Number one is, as nice as it is and fun as it is, they allow open free text chat, which means people who don't know each other might be playing a very innocent game. I play the one where you have a bumblebee that follows you around and you collect pollen, and then your bee turns it into honey, and then you get more bees and you turn more honey, and there's other players in there, and you're all just little avatars running around. Seems very innocent. But I can actually free chat with all the other players. So that's one thing to be wary of, because the second issue with Roblox is everybody thinks it's only kids playing it, when that's absolutely not the case. There's plenty of older teens and adults on Roblox. So I do have to applaud Roblox for doing two things to address this issue. It still means you need to be involved as a parent, though, okay? The first is what I'm going to show you in this video. There is a way to set security and privacy so you can limit who can chat with your kids. So you first go to the security settings, you enter a 4-digit code, okay? And that code is like a key. Now you need that code anytime you change all the other settings. So you go back now and pick privacy. And if you see below here, you can pick who can message them, who can chat with them in the app, and so on. And those settings cannot be changed without knowing that 4-digit code. Very similar to Apple, where you need, if you set restrictions, you need that special code to do it. Okay, so this is, if you haven't set this for your children who use Roblox, I highly recommend you do one of those things you can do today. The second thing that Roblox has done well, for the most part, is they have human moderators, people who are watching the chatting among the community, and they will very quickly notice if someone is trying to, let's say, ask your child, where do you live? What is your phone number? How old are you? These kinds of conversations are being monitored and flagged and blocked and removed by the Roblox moderation staff. Now, again, there's a lot of people on Roblox. There's probably not as many moderators. Is it perfect? No. That's why you as a parent should really consider using these settings, coupled with a conversation with your children about who they should or should not be communicating with, or what they should or should not be saying while they're on it. Okay. And finally, let's see, for those who are Android families, who either your phone is an Android phone like a Samsung, or your children have Android devices, they too have an app that's very similar to iOS screen time called Google Family Link. Okay, it's free on the Google Play Store. It's been around for probably 3 years now. And you can do a lot of the same things that you do in iOS screen time. You can limit the the kinds of apps based on the age, the kinds of apps they're allowed to download or use. You can limit their screen time. You can even, track location of your child if it's a mobile device, for example. Now, the one thing about Google, and I'm going to quiz you here. What is the one app that Google owns that every child and probably adult, every child loves? Does anyone know the app that Google owns that almost every child has used or loves? You know. Excellent. Somebody with the name Pre-K actually said, and also Wala Ali. YouTube is it. That's correct. So Google owns YouTube. And here's the thing about YouTube. Today, if you use YouTube, you have two options. If your child is really young, I recommend YouTube for kids, YouTube Kids. This is a special form of YouTube that only has, Elmo and those kinds of content. The other option is the regular YouTube, which even adults watch, and that means your child can see anything, right? Those are your options today. So for those of you whose children are too old for YouTube Kids, but too young for 18 plus content, there is something you can do, which is called safety mode, sorry. YouTube has a safety mode, which you turn on with your Google account, okay? Someone would need to know your Google password to turn on safety mode. But once you turn it on, it prevents a child who's searching for certain, mostly adult content is what it blocks. So if they search for that kind of content, it will not appear in the search results. They won't see those kinds of videos coming through. Is it perfect? No, like TikTok's filter, it's not completely perfect. That's why you still need to, as a parent, be monitoring what they're doing and how long they're using it and making sure you're checking in on them once in a while. That's your options for today. But in March, Google announced a new thing. It's in beta right now. It is not available to all of us yet, but this finally, I think, answers the issue of the kid who's too old for YouTube Kids, but too young for all of YouTube. And it's called the YouTube Supervised account. And from this point, once it becomes available to all of us, you will be able to manage it through Google Family Link when it's available. If you don't use Google Family Link and you're an Apple family, you'll still be able to do this. What this does is it will allow you to have 3 additional levels of content based on your children's age and maturity. And they're largely saying, for Explore, this is probably age 9 to 11. For Explore More, it's probably 12 to 14, and most of YouTube 15 to 17, right? That's what they're saying. And, I applaud them for giving this a try. Haven't seen it yet, so don't know how good it is yet, but please know that that's coming. It's in beta now. And finally, my own organization, Trend, which is a security software company, my job is purely education. But whenever I can, I will bring ideas back to our engineers. And one of the things they came up with was something called Safe Filter for Kids. It's free, and love for you to try it. There's the link, tmf.care/download. And what this does is, if your child is looking at a page, sometimes in a YouTube page, you see a bunch of images of all the videos, right? But sometimes one of those images might be inappropriate and the rest are not. What this filter does is it just blurs out the pieces that are not appropriate for your child. So this is available only as a Chrome extension right now, but if you want to give it a try, we'd love to hear your feedback. I will include this link in the document that I'll be sending out after tonight's event. Love for you to give it a try, trying to make it better. So those are a little bit about tools. I know there's a question here now. I know on Apple, my daughter was able to unpair all of her limitations at age 13. Will these settings still help restrict certain limitations? Yes, you should still be able to restrict settings. I have had to do this with my older one who's 17. She actually asked me to do it because she wanted a way to focus on, some studies that she was doing, and she found herself constantly picking up the phone and scrolling through Instagram, and 30 minutes later she's still doing it. So she actually asked me, can you just put a limit on that? So you absolutely should be able to do it even if she's 13. Like I said, I did it with my 17-year-old. Okay, again, please put your questions in the Q&A at any time. So in terms of setting rules, some of you at the beginning of this talk told me, managing screen time. You picked A, right? How do I do that? So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But generally speaking, on your rules, to make sure that they're truly holistic, try to think about these 5 areas. What are they allowed to use? When? How long? Where? And with whom? On the what, if your child ever comes home and says, Mom, Dad, can I please download Among Us or, some other game that maybe you had not heard about before? You do your homework for sure. Make sure there are lots of reviews. If there are not a lot of reviews, you might want to stay away from it for a bit. But I'm a big fan of Common Sense Media. Common Sense Media gives great objective ratings of apps, movies, television shows. They even do books. So I recommend that. Just know that you can do 3 free searches a month with Common Sense Media. They just started that. It used to be free for everything, but they just started limiting the free searches by 3 per month. But you could look up an app and see what they have to say about it. When and how long, I'll talk about next. We have an interesting exercise called the 24-hour rule that you could use with your children. Where, during the pandemic, they were only using it at home. But now that we're on the other side of the pandemic, they might actually be using it on the school bus or at a friend's house or so on, or somebody else's home. So make sure that, here's an example of the where. A lot of families have different rules about video games. So at a certain age, some kids are allowed to use, games that might be a little more violent than others. And sometimes it could be very awkward. It could create conflict when one family says it's okay and the other one says it's not. So I think it's important, if your child is going to use a gaming device at a friend's house and you're not comfortable yet that they're playing Call of Duty and even Fortnite for some ages, have the conversation and say, hey, my kid's not allowed to use that yet, so is it okay if they play something else? That would be great, right? Make sure you're having those conversations and that your child knows that those are your rules. And finally, with whom are they allowed to use it? I think the younger they are, keep it to just the people you know and that they know and also that you know. Obviously, as they get older, those of you with the 12, 13, 14-year-olds, their world starts to get bigger. There are kids they start talking about in school you never met. You don't know who their parents are. If they have shown you they can be responsible, they can start adding those people to their phone, contact lists in their phone, or who they're playing with over the Xbox and so on. But that's up to you and the readiness of your child. But that should be part of the rules. And as you decide these rules, make sure your child is part of the conversation and setting them. Get them involved in the process. They are more likely to stick to the rules they help build. Not always, but that should include what happens if they break the rules. So if they're part of it and they know, hey, if I really broke this rule, I lose the phone for however long. I was part of making the rules. That's how it works. So on this issue of screen time, I want to talk about an exercise, something you can do with your children each day about managing screen time. So this is called the 24-hour exercise. And it comes from the Digital Wellness Lab, part of the Children's Hospital, Harvard Medical School based advice on screen time. So have your child fill up like a pie chart with 24 slices, or just have them write this down. Have this conversation with them, and you say to them, there's only 24 hours in a day. As much as we all want more than 24, there's only 24. So ask them to think about, first question, how many hours today did you spend to do things that were healthy for you? Like, how many hours did you sleep? Eat meals or help prepare them. Exercise, play sports, go for a walk, ride your bike. How many hours? Now, on top of that, how many hours did you spend doing the things that support you as a learner? How many hours were you in school, doing homework, practicing a skill or hobby that you really love, or maybe you picked up something new that you're trying to learn, maybe an instrument, or even just reading? So how many hours? Now, on top of that, how many hours did you spend to support the relationships that are really very important in your life, like family and friends and neighbors? You could do some of that as screen time, but it supports the relationship. So how many hours? Now you add all of that up, and there's going to be time left over, maybe, right? And if there's time left over, it is okay for that time to be on screens, right? You've done all these things. You've helped your child think about all these things that they were doing or need to do that's really good for them. So can I use screens then? Sure. But if that time left over is 6 hours or 5 hours, that does not mean you will use screens for 6 or 5 hours. That is where you as a parent need to employ tools that we talked about and rules that you set. And what you can do instead is an idea that some parents love to do is they either create a menu or like they write on little slips of paper, fold it up, put it in a box, and the child can pick activities from that for the time left over. It could be screen time, some of it, and some of it could be not screen time, like playing board games or, drawing or something like that. So that's one way to think about screen time, because I think especially during this pandemic when we were really guilty, feeling so guilty, is it too much? If they were doing all these other things, it's okay because they've done everything else that's really good for them too. And this one I think is just very simply ask yourself, what kind of example are you setting? So I'd love to hear in the chat, what rules do you have for yourself when it comes to technology? What do you do at night before you go to bed? Is it plugged in right next to you as your alarm clock, or do you put it somewhere else? Do you not look at it for an hour before bed? What are your rules? How do you separate working from home and then just home time? And what kind of example are you setting for your children? Okay, it's going to be very difficult to set those rules if you don't have them for yourself and they don't see you holding yourself accountable to. I like this no tech at the dinner. Yeah, absolutely. My kids actually will make us feel really guilty if we look at our phone during dinner, even if it's buzzing. Hey, no phones at the dinner table. None for eating. And I do like the do not disturb function. I think that's great. I use it during meetings because it's very distracting and easy to be distracted by your phone. On being safe, let's start with privacy on this one. I know there was a question here. How can I restrict YouTube for my child's iPhone? Oh, Sheena, thank you for your question. I can provide that in the document that I'll be sending later on, but there is a way in the iPhone where you can use iOS settings, set up restrictions, and do not allow YouTube on your child's phone. You'd have to set them up under your Apple account with their own account, and you use iOS settings to restrict that app from your child's account. Okay, but I will provide it in the document too later on. So on privacy, I think one of the most obvious things we could do is use privacy settings, right? And here's the thing about privacy settings. Most every game, this is Fortnite example that you're seeing here, they don't have it on by default. So you have to go in there every time. And I think you can make a game of this with your kids. Anytime they get a new app or new game, you could say, hey, let's see how quickly you can find the privacy settings and turn them on. Let's see how fast you can get there. Getting them to have a habit of doing that first when they have a new app or device or game is a good idea. Have them start practicing now so they do it forever. And you can see here in these screenshots that I had to select private because it wasn't private when you first use Fortnite. 2 apps decided that they will turn on privacy settings for children 13 to 17. Those 2 apps are TikTok did it first, and then Instagram followed. And this just happened in the last few months. This was not true before 2021. So just know that those 2 apps they have, but you should still check it anyway the first time you download. Now, the thing about privacy settings that we should tell our children is they can protect us. They can protect us, okay? Sorry. But I'm going to show you this example here. So this is Instagram's, when I first download, all that legal stuff that goes, you just scroll right by it, right? And you go right to the bottom and you hit I accept or I agree. But for every app that's free, and even some that are not free, there's a clause in there that we all skip. And in very simple language, not legal language, but in simple language, that phrase or that section says that you own everything you do on here. Everything you post, everything you like, everything you search, everyone you're connected to, right? Your connections. But we have the right, the company who owns the app, we have the right to use it whenever, wherever, forever. Doesn't say it in those words, but it is what it means. And it's in every free app, Facebook, TikTok, all of them, okay? When you're hitting I accept, some of the things you're agreeing to is that clause. So when we talk about privacy settings, we have to understand that those settings protect us from the people we don't know, but those settings do nothing to protect our privacy from the companies who made those apps. And that's what it means when you say an app is free, it really isn't. You are paying with your personal information. And we all know that free apps have to survive, and that free information, the data they're collecting on us, is sold to advertisers. It's not associated with our name, but what they're telling them is, oh, everyone who lives in this area, who's this age, who have liked these kinds of things on the app, all like these things. So this is something about you that they're selling to advertisers, because those advertisers hope that they can show you a sponsored post or an ad and eventually want to buy whatever it is. Okay, so that's the trade-off we make for free apps. But it's also the reason why when we tell kids, hey, nothing you ever do online is truly private, this is why. Because it's not. We're not just trying to scare them. And when I've said that very thing in classrooms, I remember a 5th grade girl saying to me, when she figured this out, she got pretty angry. Some of the kids get kind of annoyed with these companies. And she asked me if she could sue Instagram. And I said to her, did you hit I accept? And she said, yes. And I said, then no, you can't, because you agreed. So that is why assume nothing we ever do is private. I know you all know that, but that is a way to talk to your children about why privacy matters so much. On protecting our information, cyber criminals have been really, really active this year because so many people have been online for so long. But they're not necessarily targeting your kids. They don't have credit cards, they don't have bank accounts, and so on. The problem is that they go wherever the people go. These criminals go wherever the people go. And some of those places are where your children are. They exist just in a search engine. If you did a search, sometimes some of those links are actually malicious fake links created by cyber criminals. Sometimes they're in these weird text messages that you get, win a free pair of Ray-Bans or whatever. And that could be the work of a cyber criminal too. Sometimes they're actually posts in social media. So that is why when we said every device that your child uses should have security software, that is why. Because if they're sometimes on these small devices, their little hand might accidentally click on something that leads them to that malicious website. If you have security software, it's not going to allow them to go. It will block them from going there in the first place. Okay, so make sure you have that. And, encourage your children to trust their instincts. When I've been in classrooms with second, third, fourth graders, and I've asked them, have you ever seen something that looked a little suspicious online? And so many hands go up. They all have said it looked really suspicious. It looked too good to be true. And I asked them, what did you do? And they said, I X'd out of it, because X is apparently a verb now. I X'd out of it. And that's good. That kind of instinct, let's encourage that with our kids. Now, if your child ever makes a mistake, if they feel like, oh, I shouldn't have clicked on that. Oh, I downloaded something I shouldn't. Make sure they know they can come to you right away so you can take action. I highly recommend those lines of communication are open, because it could be pretty dangerous if they don't tell you and some kind of malicious thing like spyware is just sitting there on the device. And if you ever use the same one to enter a credit card, that's what could happen. So make sure, hey, if anything ever goes wrong, you think you clicked on something by accident, please come to me. At that point, I recommend, if you're not using security software, you can go to some scanning tools. Trend has a free one called House Call. And you go to House Call, and House Call will scan the laptop or the desktop and tell you if there's anything residing on there and clean it up for you. And once you've cleaned it, make sure you download something to protect it from that point forward. Okay? All right. So real quickly, another poll. Do any of your kids have their own cell phone? Do any of your kids have their own cell phone? Yes, no, not yet, not for a few more years. So yes, A, B, no, C, not yet, and D, not for a few more years. Yes, no, okay. All right. Well, it looks like a lot of you have said yes. I know a lot of you were in that 11 to 14 range. And so that makes a lot of sense. So thank you. I'm going to stop that now. Good, because I think, and even for those of you whose children don't have one yet, this is important to know, because at some point they will have a phone. Okay. So the thing about the phone is we know that one of the most popular reasons people buy the phone is not actually to talk to anybody live. The reason they want that phone is the camera, right? Yes, they text too, and that's fun as well. But boy, that camera, I mean, the phone companies, every time they release a new phone, it's always a commercial about the camera and how much better the camera is getting, right? And why wouldn't we love it? Well, TikTok, we need that camera to make a TikTok, right? Or we like to take pictures and post them on social media, selfies and so on, right? Those filters that make it really fun to edit our photos before we put them out there. So I encourage your kids to do that, have fun with it, but you need to have this conversation. It's very important to have this conversation about the camera when they turn that camera towards themselves. We should remind our children that they should never, ever, ever, ever feel pressured to take a photo of themselves that they would not want the whole world seeing. And I think you all know what I'm talking about here. And the reason I need to say this is because we work with an organization called Thorn who's been tracking and who did some surveying among tweens and teens. And they asked them one simple question: how old were you the first time you were asked for a nude? We're talking 9 and 10 years old, the first time they were asked. And they're being asked by their peers, by the way. This is not strangers necessarily. In many cases, it's their own peers who are asking for them, that they really should resist any pressure to do that. You know, you might have a crush on them, but even so, we know that as soon as the photo is taken, it's already out of their hands. Because if that device gets backed up automatically to the cloud, let's say, well, now a copy's already going out there. And if they ever lost their phone, then that puts it at risk. They should never feel pressured. The second reason is because technically, the creation, possession, and distribution of those kinds of images of underage kids is technically a felony, right? The police are not going to punish a child the way they would a 50-year-old person, right? But finally, if that picture ever got out beyond, to the whole world, that would be sheer and utter anguish and devastating, I think, to that child. And so I do want to share a story with you, a question that a father asked me about 7 years ago. And I thought it was a great question I like to share with parents every year or every time I can. And he said to me, my child's a really good kid. But he's also really kind of, people like him because he's nice and so on. What happens if he ever receives one of those images, even if he never asked for it? What should I do? The phone is in my name as his father. The bill is in my name. So how will they know it's him versus me, right? And my advice to you is this, and have this conversation with your children. If they ever receive one, they should come tell you immediately and then delete it. Okay. Take the action and then delete it. The action on their part is coming to tell you. Don't keep it a secret. Make sure someone knows. Okay. The reason you should delete it is because you don't want to be passing that kind of stuff around. He shouldn't, or she shouldn't want to be possessing it either. Again, possession and distribution. You don't want to be in the middle of that. Now, if you as a parent know the person who takes care of the child who sent it, you might want to tell them if you're comfortable. If you're not, then you might want to report it to the school administration that it's being sent, because you have no idea if your child is the only one who's gotten it, okay? But take some action on your part too. Because if there is an investigation, they will already know image came from here to here. They don't need proof of it hanging around on your child's phone. They will know. So that's my advice to you. The thing about gaming, I want to just get into real quickly, is that, there is almost no game that isn't social anymore. Now, I grew up with Atari, and I did love Space Invaders and Pong. My kids think it's super boring, but hey, I could do it. I can't use those other controllers very well. And the only way I could play with someone else is they literally have to be sitting right next to me with the other joystick to play. Today, they can play with anyone, anywhere. So again, if your child is not ready, use common sense media, do some research on your own. If you don't think that those social capabilities is something they're ready for, use the privacy settings to limit who they can communicate with on those games. excuse me. And then think about two other kinds of features of games. The first is, and we talked about this with Roblox, some games like on the Xbox and PlayStation, they allow for free chatting, but some of them only allow you to select phrases to communicate. I'll give you an example of one. Rocket League. Does anybody have a kid who loves Rocket League out there? Put it in the chat. Rocket League is driving these fancy cars, and you can change the color and all that stuff. And all you do is you try and drive a car, hit this soccer ball, and it goes into a big net. That's it. Okay. And yes, you can compete against people you don't know, but the chatting, you can only select certain phrases to say to each other. You cannot freeform text. There's another thing about games. If you have a child who has trouble ripping themselves away when the time is up, let's say you set time limits on the game using iOS screen time or whatever, right? And they have trouble, they have a complete meltdown when the timer runs out, or when you tell them, hey, 5 more minutes, and they just start to panic, right? If you have a child who's like that, I highly recommend starting off with timed games. Those games that tick down and that there's a clear end, like FIFA and NBA 2K21 and NFL Madden. Rocket League is another one. There's plenty of games out there that are timed or have a clear ending, like bowling, right? After you're done with 10 frames, it's done. Those are games that I would recommend for kids who might struggle with that. By the way, for those of you who use the Xbox, Microsoft launched Xbox Family Settings just last September. It's just like iOS Screen Time. It's just like Google Family Link. It is the same kind of idea for the Xbox. It's free. It's called Xbox Family Settings. And you don't have to go to the console. You can just pick up your phone and say, I'm going to set it for, this much time. And you tell your child, okay, you got 1 hour on that. That's it, right? That's your time. All right. On being kind, we're going to go a little faster here now in these last two sections. I think very simply, we want to encourage this in our kids to be respectful and lift others up, not tear them down. And for all of the reasons we talked about before, we have to remind them that when they're doing it online, it will reflect on us, because everything we do, everything we click on, search, watch, download, like, every single thing we do on the internet is tracked. And all of those actions add up to a picture of who we are. So remind them of that. But kindness is not just about, I'm going to be nice to everybody, right? It's also about the nuances that come with that. How we can respect, truly respect. So the first question I have for you is this. Has anyone ever posted a picture on Facebook or Instagram, somewhere online, and you were in it, or your kids were in it, but they never asked you if they could put it up there, or you didn't like how you looked, or some other reason, right? Has that ever happened to you? Put it in the chat. Very uncomfortable. Somebody you know went ahead and posted it, didn't ask your permission. Has that ever happened to you? I'm sure it has. It's happened to almost everybody I've ever asked. And what did you do, right? Did you tell them to take it down? Did you just leave it and just go away a little bit upset? This is something we need to talk to our children about, because it actually leads in middle school. It can lead to a lot of drama, which then blows up into full-on bullying. Okay. With our own children, when they get that phone and then they get to download Instagram or Snapchat for the first time, make sure that, especially with their close friends, say, you know what, before you post that, why don't you just ask them if they're okay? Hey, are you okay if I put this? You good with this? Is that okay if I post that? If you just start practicing, if they hear you saying that to other people as their parent, and then they start doing it with their friends, who hopefully in return will do it with them, you can avoid a lot of that drama that begins in middle school and the phones and the cameras. on social media. Trust me. And so please, please, please talk to your kids about respecting other people's privacy. We all have different definitions of it, but we have to assume that someone else's privacy may be stricter than our own. The second thing is, we talked about this earlier with video games, but you know what? I know there's some of you out there who don't want to give your child a phone until late, right? 13 or 14. And there's others of you out there whose children may already have a phone at 11 or 12. When my children began taking the bus, which was age 11, we went ahead and gave them a Go phone, which is a prepaid phone. It looks like a smartphone, but you only pay 25, 50 bucks at a time. And we only allowed certain apps, and we only allowed 4 numbers so we could reach them. Okay. Every family's going to have different rules about when they're allowed to have the phone, when they're allowed to use TikTok for the first time, all of that. It's no different from dating, rated R movies, walking home by yourself, sleeping over at a friend's house for the first time, and so on. So have those conversations among other families that you'll respect whatever it is. And if you're in a situation where maybe your child has a phone, is already starting a group text, but there are kids that they're friends with that don't have a phone yet, encourage your children, listen, so-and-so doesn't have a phone yet, so please make sure you either email them or talk to them so they feel included in whatever is you're organizing, right? Encourage that and nurture that kind of behavior in your children. And the more of us who are doing it, the more we'll avoid all of the conflict and the uncomfortableness for these kids. It's a lot of pressure already to be a tween and a teen today. So we can remove some of that pressure. The same with time offline or time allowed online. Even if you're all allowed to have a phone, some kids might not be allowed to use it as long as other kids. I had a mother come to me once and say, you know, my daughter texted her friend and she didn't respond right away. And my daughter thought, oh my gosh, she's really mad at me. Why isn't she responding right away? And she went to bed really distraught. The next day, only to find out that her friend was not allowed to have her phone anymore at that hour. That's the reason why she didn't respond to her. It wasn't because she was mad at her. And so again, let's remind our kids that other people have different rules. So don't misinterpret what's going on. Okay. And I would just say the last thing on kindness is we've got to encourage our kids to think about it inwardly too, because social media in particular the research is showing that it is creating some anxiety and depression among kids. We may feel this. Have you ever scrolled through Facebook and you see everybody else's perfect life and all the great things they're doing during the pandemic that you chose not to do because you stayed home and whatever, right? Or vacations from the past and you said, oh, their life is so much better than mine. Have you ever felt like that? Well, our kids can too, and they're going to feel it more intensely because that's what it means to be an adolescent. You feel everything far more intensely at those ages. So we've got to remind our children, especially as they begin their lives on social media, okay, that their value is not equal to the number of likes, followers, comments, friend requests, whatever. Their value should not be equal to that. They are greater than that. We have to disassociate children from tying up their personal worth to the things going on in social media. There are many other things they do that are great. We have to keep encouraging and reminding them of that. So we can be supportive of our kids. We can think about these things long before they get a phone. For those of you whose children don't have a phone yet, be ready to have these conversations, especially as they go into social media, because it's so much more complex. And the relationships they have with technology and others through it can become more complex. And it's not always bad things that are going on online. So whenever you find a story on the internet that just makes you feel good, that makes you have faith in humanity again, Share those stories with your kids so they know that not everything going on in the internet is just horrible. There are good things happening. There are good people out there still. On being savvy, I'm just going to close with these good skills that you could practice. Okay. So, one of the things that's really difficult these days to distinguish is what can I even believe anymore online? Is it real? Is that true story? Is that a real person or is that a bot? I don't know. Because it's too easy to take a photo, someone else's photo, and just open up an account under a different name. So if you're not sure, if your child gets a friend request or you get a request or somebody's commenting on your post and you don't know who they are, you don't even know if they're a real person, one of the things you can do is take their photo and their account and do a reverse image search. Just go to google.com/image or you can just search whatever search engine you like and search the term reverse image search. And you take the photo from that account and you paste it, and it will return all the places that that photo's been seen before. And that's a really good way of knowing, oh, wait a minute, that person is not really that person because that photo came from this magazine and that website. It was used in all these other ways. So you could tell if it's fake or not. Another thing, again, we don't know if some of the things we're reading in the news are real or not. And even with our kids, it's never too early to encourage good media literacy skills. And one of the things they can do before they see a story, especially the ones that are written in a way to really get us emotional, right? You should immediately go, let's just think about this for a minute. Is that for real? Now, it could be, but it's not a bad idea to ask a lot of questions before you believe it, share it, respond to it, act on it, or do anything with it immediately. And while I won't go through all the questions here, I will say that in the document I'm going to send, we created a parent's guide to media literacy together with the National Association for Media Literacy Education. And this guide walks you through scenarios. One of them says, your child says, hey, mom, I really want this. I saw an ad for this and I really want that. Or, I heard this story, and it walks through a dialogue between you and your child and how you can help them, practice the skills of asking questions and thinking critically before believing or acting on the information. Okay, question for you. One of the last questions I'm going to ask. How many of you have ever looked your own name up on the internet? Has anyone ever looked their own name on the internet? Just put it in the chat, yes or no. If you ask your kids, have you ever asked your kids? If you haven't, ask them. In the classrooms that I have visited over the years, many of your children have. What did you find? What did you find? So sometimes you'll find your cyber twin. You'll find the person who shares your name, but is clearly not you. Okay. It's not a bad idea to know if there's someone out there that shares your name, but maybe has a background that you definitely don't want to have confused with yours. Okay. But it's also a good idea to see if there's anything out there at all that you don't want known or you don't want public, right? So it's not a bad idea to do this on a regular basis, and you don't have to go searching every time. You can actually set up Google alerts. So if you go to google.com/alerts and you can set it up so it will flag you anytime that word, phrase, or name is out there on the public internet, right? Is out there publicly on the internet. So you would see an example here of just Trend Micro, right? It's just an example. You could put your child's name. You could put your own name, and then you'll get an email weekly, daily, whatever, if you want. If you use Bing as your search engine, they have a similar alert capability. Just do a search on how to set up a Bing alert. But most people use Google as their search engine. Okay. And there's a reason why, there's a couple other reasons why it's important. Okay, here's one. Starting in 2014, the Kaplan Institute began asking college admissions officers all across the United States a question. And the question was this: beyond the application that a student sends to you through the common application, let's say, do you also look them up on the internet? So in 2014, the answer was 25% said yes. Then the next year, 30, 35, 40, and you can imagine it just kept going up and up and up, right? But they changed the question about 2 years ago, slightly. This past year, this past January, the most recent report, 65% of the respondents said that they would look up a student online if they had to. They certainly felt like it was within their rights to say, I'm just not sure about this student. Let's see what we find. And for those who did look, 58% said they found something that was not favorable, and they decided against that student. But 42% said they found something that convinced them, yes, this is the student we want here. Why do I bring that up? The reason I bring that up is there may be a reason when someone searches your name that you do want to be found. The question is, what do they find? And this is why it's so important for us to remember all of the things we talked about, to remember to use privacy settings, to post with care, to be kind to others. But that's going to largely make your child invisible if they're doing all of those things right. So that when someone in this position looks up your child, they might find nothing. We want to make sure that if they do find them, that might find something really good too. And this is why encouraging good uses is just as important as telling our children what not to do. How can we do that? Well, you probably are already doing this. Your children are probably already using YouTube or even TikTok to learn new things. They're using the internet in a positive way like that. They might be promoting a cause. Maybe their school is trying to raise money for something, right? They could also use certain sites to showcase their accomplishments. There are sites like Huddle that are used for student athletes. If they're a good writer or photographer, they like to write, they like to perform, whatever. Every child has good talents. They have their talents. You could start to collect those in an online space. You don't have to make them public now. You can hide them behind a privacy setting until they're older and ready to showcase that. Maybe 16, 17 years old. And, another great way to use the internet in positive ways, especially if they have a talent that could benefit them, is to enter contests. It's a great use of internet time. Many great contests for students out there, writing, photography, lots of different kinds of contests. They may never win, or maybe they will. But to collect all of the contests that you've tried to enter and just start collecting the work that you're doing, that's a wonderful use of the internet. Those are the kinds of things that we might want to be encouraging our kids. Yes, you should watch the kittens climbing all over things and falling off chairs. That's fine. But what else are you doing with the internet beyond just, watching YouTube? And so I just remind you in wrapping here that you should stay definitely active as a parent in this topic. Just listening to me tonight, that's one thing, but it's something you'll have to keep up on forever because the technology changes, the issues change. I know, having done this for 13 years, how much it's changed. And also keep talking, not just with your children, but with each other as parents within your same communities, your schools. Communicate with your schools and understand how are they using technology, not just today, but in the future, for their educational purposes. Stay involved that way and stay up to date. I'm going to show you some contact information in a minute where I'd love for you to follow me on Twitter. I'm pretty active there. I try to keep people up to date on the latest issues. But I challenge you tonight or tomorrow to do one new thing. Maybe it's turning on multi-factor authentication on TikTok for your kids, or privacy settings, or doing the 24-hour conversation. Whatever it is, do one new thing. And as I promised at the beginning of the call, here are the attendance codes again for those of you who need this. Not all of you do, but some of the schools did ask that I provide an attendance code. So whatever code is to the right of your school, please write that down. And I think you might have to report it to your PTO or PTA leader as evidence of your attendance tonight. Okay. Any questions? Go ahead and put them in the chat. And as you're putting in your questions, I point you to our resources at internetsafety.trendmicro.com, where you'll find all of these resources available in 8 to 9 languages, including Spanish. Thank you, Gigi, for your support tonight. Oh, yes, I have a question to put the codes back up. Here we go. Attendant codes are back up. And the other thing is, when you do the survey, which will pop up when you leave the session tonight, if you want to put your email address, it's optional. You don't have to. But if you do, then we'll enter you in a drawing to win 1 of 5 copies of Trend Micro Maximum Security. That can be securing up to 5 devices in your home, which includes cell phones, by the way. And so I'm going to go ahead and move forward. So hopefully everybody got the code. Okay, everybody got the code? Great. And whatever email address you use to log into Zoom tonight, I will be emailing all of you with all of the links that I referenced this evening in a document. I can also send the link of the codes for you as well. If you're interested in getting a copy of tonight's recording, there's the feedback form here. There's a picture of what you could win if you enter your email address in the feedback form. And here's my contact information. If you would like to receive a copy of tonight's recording, please email me at the email address shown here. If you have questions and would like to ask them in Spanish, please go ahead and ask it in the Q&A, and I will have Gigi translate it for me. So any questions, please go ahead and put it in the Q&A in English or Spanish. That is all from me tonight. If there are no further questions, then I wish you all a wonderful evening. Good luck to the end of the school year. Congratulations on making it through this very difficult time. I appreciate you spending this time. We will be hosting this session every year. So we will be back at it again in the fall through the following spring with brand new updated content. So feel free to reach out, sign up for the Tech Talks again through PTO today. The new version for sign up will be coming, I think, in June. And we'd love to have you again, for sure. I've enjoyed it very much. I hope it was helpful, and I'd love to hear from you. Follow me on Twitter or shoot me an email. All right. Oh, I have a question here about Discord. I would love to get into that here, but I would need to, I'll probably put it in the document that I send to you, if that's okay, just to allow people to leave at this point. But Discord is becoming a very, it was already very big place. It's technically shared server space, very popular among gamers, but now it became a very popular place for all kids, especially during the pandemic, as a way to stay in touch. But good question. And I think I would like to add Discord in our future version of this talk. All right. Thank you to Gigi for muchas gracias, Gigi. We'll see you for tomorrow's event.